everybody. It's 6 o'clock, so we are going to get started. Hello, my name is Liz Gray. I am a neighborhood quality consultant with Oakland Planning and Development Corporation. Tonight, we are talking about Oakland mobility projects. And our featured speaker for the evening is Mavis Rainey. She is the Executive Director of Oakland Transportation Management Association. And we're going to be talking about the integrated mobility study and get updates on our favorite thing, the e-scooter program. So it's over to you, Mavis.
Hey, Liz. Hi, everybody. Apologies for only hearing me versus seeing me. I'm fighting with Verizon on what the fair rate should be for a high-speed internet. So apologies for that. As Liz had talked about, there are a couple of things we wanted to just bring to everybody's attention, get your feedback on. One, the mobility study. This is a project that's identified in the Oakland plan that was recently adopted in July of last year. I wanted to just kind of walk folks through that. The integrated mobility study is actually birthed from a lot of discussions that came out of the Oakland strategies chapter within the plan. And we were able to have conversations with the state, meaning PennDOT, when the plan conversations began back in 2020, I want to say. And for 2 years, keeping them abreast of the conversation. And one of the things we wanted to just convey is that we were able to get the study to commit, the state to commit to providing $300,000 of funding for the implementation of an 18 to 24 month integrated mobility study. The components of the study really address a number of mobility barriers that were identified during the discussion with the Oakland stakeholders, action teams that were part of the development for the Oakland plan. Some of the mobility barriers included the steep topography that creates challenges in the use of traditional micromobility resources, such as the e-scooters that Liz had mentioned, bikes, the micromobility options that have been introduced for the city of Pittsburgh, and the other challenges that existed that were spoken to. Transportation corridors functioning as high volume, high speed roadways, creating mobility barriers by preventing neighborhood circulation and access to challenging crossings for non-motorized modes. An example would be the Boulevard of the Allies. There have been lots of conversations about that corridor. Some other mobility challenges are barriers such as the Oakland neighborhood being serviced by public transit along the 5th and Forbes corridor, but we still see transit service gaps that exist in other parts of the neighborhood, particularly South and West Oakland. Additional challenges include transportation circulation beyond individual car use in the Oakland area, are institutional shuttles. The shuttles, as we know, are privately operated. They're not available to the public. In some cases, there are redundancies in where the shuttles operate with public transit. The institutional shuttle operators who were part of the various different action groups during the development of the Oakland plan have admitted that there are some redundancies and that they're working collaboratively right now to improve efficiencies and reduce where those private shuttles and public transit service overlap. As conversations continued with the Oakland stakeholders, there was a lot of expressed interest in the creation of a shuttle circulator that would establish services not currently provided by public transit between Southwest and North Oakland, as well as the surrounding neighborhoods. Institutional shuttle operators also acknowledge that transportation gaps that exist in the Oakland neighborhood, that a circulator would be a great asset to the community. And so to address the expressed mobility challenges and physical barriers, an integrated mobility study was introduced as part of a project within the mobility strategies chapter of the Oakland plan. The study would basically inform how we might incorporate the operation of a community circulator, which would be a locally based transit service that would complement regional public transit fixed route service. And that would be the Port Authority or PRT and Westmoreland Transit. It would look at a broader integrated mobility network in Oakland as well. Considering that we have institutional shuttles that would continue to operate, they serve a purpose on behalf of the institutions, but also look how we could complement the individual mobility options that folks use, such as people who drive individually, folks who are part of carpools, van pools, the use of VMT like Uber, Lyft, Z-Trip, and other mobility options. And the goal is ultimately to look at how we can improve neighborhood circulation and connectivity, address specific gaps, reduce redundancies of service for public transit and shuttles, and identify first and last mile options to encourage folks to be able to use multimodal travel. And ultimately, by reducing the number of vehicles that we have on the roadway, that'll help to alleviate congestion, improve air quality, and also we hope also improve quality of life for Oakland. So if you have a chance to go to, Liz, can you pull up the Oakland plan, the mobility chapter? Can you show that?
I can, if you give me a second.
Okay. Because there's a lot more information that was included within the Oakland plan.
Mavis, just to jump in, I'm happy to share the
Okay,
Oakland plan.
great.
I have it pulled up and I can kind of help people navigate through the site if that's helpful.
Okay, that'd be great.
Okay, I will try to share my screen 1 second. All right, so this is a great opportunity. It allows me to kind of build on my last presentation, walking through the Oakland plan in its website form. So once again, Christian Umbach, neighborhood planner for Oakland with city planning. It's good to see you all tonight. Thank you, Mavis, for taking this opportunity to showcase this project. Can everyone see this homepage of the Oakland plan?
Yeah.
Great. So we have all the projects organized by the topical chapters. So we could find this in the mobility chapter. There's a few other ways to search, but in terms of also organizing how we're implementing projects, we also have this new implementation page, which I introduced last time. So this is a quick way for folks to also find projects. And if we scroll down and look at some of the projects that are on deck, next in line for implementation, we can see that we organize them so that you can see the projects that we're focusing on right up front here. And we can see this is the project Mavis has referenced, the Integrated Shuttle and Transit Mobility Study. So we can click on here and we can get directly to the project page, which is really a deep dive focusing on all the information specific to this project. And this includes what we heard, some specifics about project goals, components, and also timelines and budget items as well. So I'll pass it back over to Mavis to kind of talk through some of this. If you are curious about other mobility projects, generally you can also go directly to the mobility chapter. And in that case, you would be going down and looking at projects and programs, and you could find this in the same way right here. So hopefully that's a helpful way to orient everyone with what we're talking about here. And yeah, I'll pass it back over to Mavis. You can feel free to direct me and we can look at what you would like to focus on. So thank you.
So what Christian had outlined that you're looking at now in regard to the Oakland plan, we shared the same information with PennDOT as we started conversations about the exploration of planning money that would allow us to conduct the study. And as we started having the conversations, one of the things that the state was really interested in, one, they've not done anything like this across the state. So there was a tremendous interest in looking at all the different transportation modal options and resources that are at folks' disposal that never looked at how you could actually create an integrated system that would help to manage that, and also to look at how each of the different options would be complementary to each other and that would ultimately help to enhance connectivity, mobility, certainly address safety, and allow for really investment into transportation, certainly for a community like Oakland, that is one of the third most congested regions of the state. So we were really excited about the conversation with the state. So the next steps in regard to the conversation about the integrated mobility study is identifying the funding source that the state would like to look at. So there's something called PennDOT Connects, and PennDOT Connects is planning money that would be used to actually help to conduct the study. Oh, we just lost the image, Christian. Did you stop sharing?
Yeah, stop sharing. You want to go back up?
Please. Yeah, I want to go
Okay.
over the project goals and objectives.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I'll hold it right here.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So as I kind of talked through, and apologies if I'm speaking fast, but the project and goals for the integrated mobility study, conduct a planning study to take a comprehensive look at not just shuttle operations, but everything that's moving into, through, and around Oakland. Public transit, that is individual vehicles, bikes, that is services like Uber, Lyft, deliveries, everything and anything that's moving in the neighborhood, to see how we could actually comprehensively look at how those systems could possibly eliminate redundancies, complement each other, and enhance mobility versus making it more complicated, and address specific mobility and transportation barrier gaps that I had mentioned before. So first, we'll identify redundancies in service between institutional shuttles and the Port Authority. We have two transit agencies in Oakland, the Port Authority and Westmoreland Transit. They typically run on 5th and Forbes. Institutional shuttles have a much broader movement in the Oakland neighborhood. One of the things that we talked about with the state is that public transit investment is only going to be along the 5th and Forbes corridor. We know that there's a need for public transit in South Oakland, crossing the Boulevard of the Allies. We know that there is an interest in public transit services for North Oakland and for West Oakland, Central Oakland as well. And so the intent is to have the study look at not just PRT, but look at Westmoreland Transit and look at the shuttle operations to see what we could do to address those issues. Identify current first last mile options. This is everything from how you would choose it to when you leave your home to your destination, whether it be Oakland or another area. Are you walking, biking? Are you making a multimodal trip? What are the needs that we need to address to make that a much more better experience for you as someone who needs to travel? Identify gaps in service. We talked about that. Examine feasibility of a shuttle for Oakland. Folks may remember, Liz, I know you remember the 84B. This was a transit service that was operated by the Port Authority of Allegheny County. That service was eliminated some time ago. And when the conversations about the integrated mobility study first started, that was one of the examples that residents had mentioned, that they would love to see the return of a public transit bus that would circulate throughout the entire neighborhood. So this started the conversations with the state about funding a planning study that we could look at in regard to public transit. Identifying opportunities for investments in transit that can create public benefit and replace shuttle services. Again, here, I want to make sure that it's clear that the goal is not institutional shuttle circulation. We know that the institutions will continue to operate the shuttles or looking at efficiencies, but we want to look at how we can complementary have services being provided by the institutions for their faculty, staff, and students, but also look at service that can be provided for residents that live in Oakland, visitors, students, employees, how those two services can complement each other. So the goal for the plan is to look at how we can bring together the core stakeholders of Oakland to be part of this conversation. And one of the things that the state would like us to do, and we're having a conversation now about that, is that who are the core stakeholders? And one of the things we'd love to do is get feedback from folks here. We have identified a number of individuals and representatives to be part of a project stakeholder group who would really be responsible for the oversight for the study. We would get together and talk about the project outline, what are the core components that we'd like to see but also two, with the state funding that's being provided, we would be working with a consultant who would be responsible for conducting the comprehensive study, but also very, very much involved with the establishment of public engagement. So I just want to kind of walk through some of the stakeholders. The TMA would be one of the stakeholders, Oakland Residential Organizations, West Oakland, OPDC, and on behalf of Central Oakland, the Belford Area Citizens Association for North Oakland, and the Oak Cliff Community Organization on behalf of South Oakland, the Oakland Business Improvement District, our three institutions, Carnegie Mellon University, Pitt, and UPMC. Carlo also has been invited to be part of this group as well. Christian on behalf of City Planning, Ernie Francisteen, who is the TDM coordinator for DOMI. Pittsburgh Regional Transit, Westmoreland Transit would be part of that stakeholder group, the Southwestern Pennsylvania Commission, as well as PennDOT, the local office, which is in Bridgeville. This would be the core stakeholders group. The goals and objectives of that group, again, are outlined in the Oakland plan. They would follow certainly what's being communicated here for the core components of the study. And in addition to that, one of the things we would like to have done for the study is within the mobility chapter of the Oakland plan in the section, see there's existing documents, existing studies that were done for this. Kittleson did an existing condition study, I believe in 2021. And it looked at a lot of the things we're talking about that would be part of the integrated mobility study. The consultant would be asked to look at existing conditions today and do a comparison, primarily to make sure that what we've identified as a project goals and objectives in the study, how do they merit with what came out of the recommendations for the existing conditions report that was done initially when the Oakland plan was being implemented. We would also have comprehensive work done to look at traffic calming and safety, curbside management, active transportation, which would be things like the POGO, bike share. We had e-scooters in here. They've now since that project's been put on hold, but we know micromobility is going to be a component to this. The use of personal bikes, city steps. We have several city steps, Lawn Street, Fraser Street, John Care. Transit accessibility equity in regard to where we have the transit services, and then network travel patterns. This is everything from residential movement to the movement of employees coming into the area, visitors, students, and then what they're utilizing to do the travel. We're also hoping for alternatives to be presented as well. Within the existing conditions document that was done, there are some recommendations on what we could do. But again, we know that there's been a tremendous amount of changes in regard to how folks are traveling since 2020. We also know that there is a lot of hybrid work that's being offered now. So we don't see as much of the population we're used to traveling into Oakland. Folks are working typically 3 days at home, 2 days in the office, or the reverse. So we know that travel demand is slightly different. I know there's a lot of information here, so I apologize for that. But what's happening with the integrated mobility study now is that the state has received a draft of a project outline that has a lot of the components you see here, and then the identification of who the stakeholders are, and then the deliverables of what we would like to see. And we are currently working on the finalizing of the contract. And the contract really is the funding of $300,000 for an 18 to 24 month study. It would include the securing of services by a consultant. It would also include the development for comprehensive public engagement. That would include a lot of folks in this room. And ultimately, we would have a final report from the consultant that would, again, determine and inform what would be the next steps. For example, the idea of a community circulator. Is that something that we can do? Would there be resources for a demonstration project? And would that also address a lot of the concerns that were communicated during the discussion about the mobility barriers and challenges that folks had expressed when the mobility chapter discussions had started. So in a nutshell, I know that's a lot of information. We do have a project outline that we can share. Again, it's in draft form, so apologies I couldn't have that information displayed here. I would love to get some feedback from folks about, one, are there organizations or individuals who would like to be part of that core stakeholder group? We will be conducting, when I say comprehensive public engagement to bring folks into the conversation, there will be a number of presentations. There will be a number of opportunities through focus groups, through email communications, through an interactive project website where folks can give feedback. Also, the Engage page section for the Oakland plan will also house the ability for folks to be able to provide feedback as well. But wanted to ask again, one, is there anyone else, any other organizations or individuals that we should include as part of that core stakeholder group? And then are there questions about the study that folks have that we haven't been able to answer?
Mavis, can I ask a quick question?
Yep.
When you were listing the participants, did you have song in there? South Oakland Neighborhood Group?
I had listed Oak Cliff, but
Right.
yeah, that's a good point. So I'll list, is that Tariq?
Randy and Todd.
Okay.
Hey, Mavis. This is Tosh. Is Obed on that stakeholder group as well?
Yes. So we included a number of the members of the Oakland Task Force. That includes the Oakland Business Improvement District. Tosh, Innovate PGH is listed as well. So apologies for not identifying that group. OPDC, Oak Cliff, and Baca, as well as the Corner as our Oakland residential groups. And then we have DOMI, City Planning, PennDOT, our two transit agencies, the TMA, and the PennDOT local district, as well as SPC as the stakeholder groups. We were trying to, as you can imagine with a project like this, you could have 30 people on a core stakeholder group. So we were trying to be as strategic as possible in making sure that we have as broad a representation and having specific points of contact who can actually represent those organizations. So anyone else that you think that we should be including in this?
I'm not sure who a good representative or point of contact would be, but is Carnegie Mellon on that list? I know they're technically outside of Oakland. Okay.
Yeah, so our three institutions are part of this. One, they're members of the TMA board of directors, and two, as providers of transportation, they are the operators of the institutional shuttles. They wanted to be part of the conversation to certainly look at how we can complementary work together in regard to addressing mobility, but also recognizing that the institutional shuttles at this time will still remain private. They're not going to be open to the public.
I have a curiosity question here. You said Westmoreland Transit?
There are two transit agencies that travel into Oakland every day, certainly Monday through actually Saturday as well. Pittsburgh Regional Transit, as we know, Westmoreland Transit travels on 5th and Forbes into Oakland daily. So as an operator of public transit, they would be part of the conversations.
Does PRT or Pittsburgh Transit, do they operate the airport wire?
The 20 decks, yes, they do.
See that Devon has a raised hand. If you want to ask a question.
Devon?
Yes, thank you, guys. Hey, Mavis, would you be able to make sure that our office is at least included on any kind of group-oriented emails that come out of this working group?
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Thank you.
Mavis, can everyone hear me?
Mhm.
Okay, Mavis, we had a, I put this in the chat, but we had an email today from a neighbor who couldn't be here talking about considering the 84B. And you and I had spoken about that before the meeting. This is Jared Klein with OPDC, by the way. I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit more, just for like, give a little context for maybe people that aren't familiar with the 84B, and talk a little bit about the role that served and the role of community circulators.
So the 84B was I was on mute, sorry. The 84B was really a great demonstration for a community circulator. It was operated by the Port Authority of Allegheny County, which is now PRT. And it did travel through South Oakland. It traveled across the Boulevard of the Allies into Central Oakland. It went into North Oakland, also went over to the South Side. And the bus frequency was a bit of a challenge. It ran, I think, once an hour. And so there was some, that created a challenge for folks to access the vehicle. It was a long trip as well. And the 84B was one route that was among many that was eliminated when the Pittsburgh Port Authority, Regional Transit, when they did a transportation oriented development plan, looking at the operation frequency of buses throughout the entire system. And the 84B was one of the buses that was eliminated because of, I think, lack of ridership. And quite frankly, the 84B was an example of a circulator that we had used when we started the conversations with the state. Some of the components, if folks remember, are you familiar with Next Transit? Next Transit is a 50-year plan that has been introduced by, I'm going to keep calling it the Port Authority of Allegheny County, apologies. And so within Next Transit, you're familiar with BRT, Bus Rapid Transit. That is the investment that PRT is going to be making along the 5th and Forbes corridor in Oakland. Everything from express bus service from the East Busway, the eastern neighborhoods into Oakland. They're looking at the installation of a number of bus stations. They're looking at the frequency of buses. They're going to be changing some of the routing for local routes like the 61s and 71s. Within that investment for BRT, one of the things that's missing is circulation. The buses run along a 5th and Forbes corridor, but there's no consideration for the need for access in North Oakland, through Central Oakland, or through South Oakland. So the idea of circulation, it's looking at the community as a whole and how can folks actually move from, if you live in South Oakland, you can't get from your home up to, let's say, the VA right now. You have to basically catch a bus, go downtown, and then come back out again. If you're in Central Oakland and you want to get down to, let's say, the South Side, same thing. There's no way for you to be able to do that in a single trip. You have to go downtown. That's because of the nature of the way the system is established. So the proposal for the mobility study, we hope, will, one, support the interest in a neighborhood circulator, and what form that would take, we're not quite sure. But the idea is to be able to provide that ability for someone to stay within the Oakland neighborhood and get from point A to point B without having to go downtown. Make it accessible, make it affordable, make sure that it actually also has a frequency that really would address the times that folks would need to travel. And so, again, the 84B was really the model that we were using when we first started talking about the need for a community circulator.
This is Elena from Oak Cliff. I think it needs to be noted that the drop in ridership from the 84B coincided with the universities offering shuttles for their students.
And how long ago was that they shut down the 84B? 20 years?
The last update. Was there 20?
No, no,
2008 was when it was included.
yeah, more like 20, 15, 20.
Yeah, the Port Authority had a new CEO, Steve Bland, in 2007. When Steve came on board, he was the first person to speak about bus rapid transit. Shortly thereafter that, they had their transit development plan that ultimately ended up reducing a number of the buses across the system. So I want to say 2010, maybe 2011. It's been some time since that the 84B was actually in service. And Elena noted in regard to the 84B and its impact with ridership because of related to the institutions implementing shuttle service in South Oakland.
Any other questions, comments, concerns?
I have one, just a clarification thing. For the discussion of like redundancies, removing redundancies in service, is that going to be possible if the shuttles are still like catering to their individual institutions, or is the plan then to combine institutional shuttles into like one major institutional shuttle? Obviously, the plan hasn't happened, but is that like, do we think that's realistic at the given time? Because right now it seems like we're not that there's anything. The more circulation, the more routes, in many cases, the better. Especially if we're talking about truly like public transportation. But like, if we have still private, separate institutional shuttles, is there any possibility of combining in the future? I've heard that many times. Like,
sure. And great question. So there's kind of a combination of what you just talked about. One, in looking at redundancy, one of the conversations occurring right now is one identifying where a PIT shuttle, UPMC, or CMU shuttle are running, where that service is also provided by public transit. If it is, are there opportunities to reconsider the need for an institutional shuttle versus encouraging the use of public transit? That would be one. Two, there are a few areas where we actually do see overlap with the institutional shuttles themselves. And that conversation about, okay, does all three need to have a shuttle servicing this specific location? And if the answer is no, we can look at maybe there is one shuttle that actually would provide accommodation among the three institutions. You would look at that as well. So the institutions have begun those conversations. They've been talking for, I want to say, the last year and looking at that. And we are encouraged because they want to be part of these conversations as well. And again, recognize the importance of public transit, the need that it serves, but also recognizing that their shuttles have a very specific benefit and use, on behalf of the institutions and the travel demand for the faculty, staff, and students. The institutions are also committed to encouraging the use of public transit. For example, we know Pitt students can use their ID to ride Pittsburgh Regional Transit. CMU also has the program for folks to be able to use public transit also. So there isn't a plan to not encourage public transit, but to embrace it. But the institutional shuttles would also provide an enhancement based on that travel demand for faculty, staff, and students. Does that help to answer the question? I hope I did it justice.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Sorry if I was kind of stumbling over myself there. And I'm also glad that you mentioned the usage of public transit by students, because I think a substantial population, just to speak for myself, but also people that I know do use that service. I think probably more than the shuttles. And I think making sure that that perspective is in there when that conversation is happening, I think would benefit everyone, because we don't need to have anyone missing and result in, even more redundancy or leaving more people out that are currently left out now. So yeah, I appreciate you like bringing that part up too.
I can mention just on behalf of the universities, sharing shuttles. I got an email last week. I'm a CMU student. CMU students can use the PIT shuttles now for free. And CMU students also get free public transit as well as PIT. So there is already some crossover in the institutions.
Christian, see your raised hand?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Mavis, quick question. Trying to understand this potential circulator. Will the study look at the vehicle type and size that this public PRT vehicle could take? Because we know the institutional shuttles of various sizes, and thinking about, I believe it was identified that in neighborhood streets, maybe smaller right sizing vehicles. Is that something the study would consider, whether the new circulator route would be a full PRT bus or would be some smaller vehicle?
Great question. The 84B, if folks remember, was actually a smaller, it wasn't a traditional 40-foot coach because, again, that can be very difficult to maneuver, especially on some of the narrow streets going into the neighborhood. And so, yes, absolutely would look at the type of vehicle. Everything from, is it a hybrid vehicle? Is it an electric vehicle? Should it be something smaller than a traditional 40-foot coach? Even conversations about who would actually operate the shuttle as well. So from the TMA perspective, one of the things that we would love to do is see a demonstration project that would introduce a community circulator for Oakland. But in order for us to determine if that makes the most sense, that's why the integrated mobility study is something that we need to have conducted. We have a question from PPT about Oakland for All being included as a stakeholder group. Oakland for All, for folks who aren't aware, it's a collaboration of stakeholders. It's nonprofit organizations, it's individuals, it's residents, it's students, it's employees, institutions themselves. We also have some folks from government also that are focused on mobility and access for folks regardless of their abilities. It highlights the importance of accessibility, specifically for the disability community. And so Oakland for All will be part of the conversations and one of the stakeholder groups that we engage during the public engagement component of the study. I'm also a member of Oakland for All as well, so. The City County Task Force on Disabilities, there was also a question about that group. We do actually have, you're welcome. We also have some members of the City County Disability Task Force will be part of the study as well.
Mavis, is there any student representation on this?
As a member of the stakeholder committee or with public engagement?
No, the stakeholder committee.
No, but there will be. That's a great point. Recommendations on who we could reach out to would be wonderful.
I haven't.
So if I could briefly, and then I promise I'll shut up. The schedule for the integrated mobility study, we are finalizing the contract with the state now. And apologies, I know Elena has reached out about the first stakeholder meeting for the study. We really are not being permitted to do anything until after the contract is in place. And so the goal is that in fall of 2023, we would begin to bring the stakeholder group together, have the group look at the project outline to see and agree upon what's there. Are there missing components to the project outline, deliverables, goals, objectives? Those align with what's in the integrated mobility study in regard to what's on the Oakland plan. So you can kind of compare that. And then next steps would be consultant selection. And there's a very, very exhaustive process with the state to identify a project consultant And once the consultant's on board, we'll finalize the scope of work and begin the public engagement component to the study. And we will be creating a dedicated website for this project. That'll also be accessible via the Engage page as well for the integrated mobility study. So it's accessible to anyone who is interested in getting information. There'll again will be a series of focus groups. There'll be multiple ways that folks can provide feedback, and we'll also include the study schedule on that website as well.
Are there any other questions? Comments, concerns?
If not, then.
Okay, are there any announcements well, I'll make an announcement. Tomorrow is Clutter for a Cause Day from 9 until 1 o'clock. The students from Pitt will be down at the Zulema Park collecting your unwanted household goods to keep them in circulation. And they'll be working with Thriftburg and the Green Team and the Office of Sustainability, which I can never say, and the Office of Student Affairs, which is being renamed something. Okay, and Gabby, do you have anything else to bring?
Yeah, the only other thing that I put up on the table, just some updates for our supplemental trash pickup days. Justin and I were out canvassing last week and did notice students are moving out currently. So on top of clutter, the next 6 Fridays will be our supplemental trash pickups. So we touched every door. Everybody that is on the route should have gotten a notification. Yeah, the next one will be this Friday, the 21st.
And the next Let's Talk is going to be about Oakland music venues.
That's right. Next month in August, the Let's Talk is going to be about the lack of live music in Oakland, the lack of, speaking as somebody who used to come out to Oakland a long time ago, there used to be so many places for live music in Oakland. Now all there is an underground garage scene, basement scene, which is not the safest and best of situations. So we're going to be discussing that with people from the Nighttime Economy Office of the City of Pittsburgh. I'm hoping we'll also have somebody over from Zone 4 and of course the university. And really with students moving in, it would be a great time to involve more students, okay? And business around Oakland. Okay. If we don't have anything else.
Actually,
Hey, Liz.
We're skipping scooters.
Yeah, actually, hey, Liz.
Stop.
thank you, Jared.
This is Mavis.
Sorry, that was very
sorry.
Freudian on my part.
So Liz, this is Mavis, if I could. So, yeah, there were 2 other things we wanted to talk about. And one of them is indeed the e-scooters, and Tosh has graciously offered to provide an update. I also wanted to share with folks that the first series of public engagement for the Bate Street widening project is going to begin, led by the state with Michael Baker International as the consultant. And so I wanted to kind of just walk folks through what that effort is going to look like. And but I'll let Tosh talk about the e-scooters.
Thanks, Mavis. And it was great to hear about the integrated study. And I know we've both been really excited about that for a couple of years. So thanks for that. Yeah, so I'm here to talk about scooters. And yeah, they've kind of disappeared. Some of you may be kind of concerned about that. Some of you may be celebrating that. I think everybody has an opinion about the scooters that you're absolutely entitled to. So I'm here on behalf of the city's Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. I actually used to work for that department, but I now work for Innovate PGH, which is partnered with Domain to manage Move PGH, which is a transportation program that kind of encompassed the scooter pilot. So yeah, what happened to the scooters? Like I said, it was a pilot that lasted 2 years and expired at the beginning of this month. The intention behind the scooters was to test them in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Actually, Pittsburgh was the only city in Pennsylvania that received authorization from the state to deploy a scooter program. You'll see a lot of privately owned scooters throughout the city, but those are actually operated illegally or in kind of a legal gray area. But Pittsburgh welcomed the scooters to at least test their effectiveness and see how they could be integrated with the transit system and all of the other transportation services under this umbrella of PGH. Like I said, that authorization that was given by the state expired at the beginning of the month. That was something that the city had actually attempted to extend and worked with state lawmakers to attempt to give us till the end of the year to continue having the scooter program here until we could, at that end of the year mark, kind of evaluate everything, or take all of our evaluation, have a lot of broad conversations about what the scooter program should continue to look like, and go from there. Unfortunately, that time kind of ran out. The effort to pass legislation at the state that would have allowed scooters to continue to operate here just wasn't able to have passed, along with a lot of other legislation that other nonprofits were aiming to get through state legislation. The lawmakers at Harrisburg, but weren't able to do. It was kind of their kind of contentious year for Harrisburg, to say the least. So all that to say, the scooters have been tested over these last 2 years, and we've actually been working with a think tank called the Shared Use Mobility Center to look at the program, take all of the data in terms of ridership, and surveys of the riders themselves, as well as there was a broad circulation of surveys throughout the public. I know it was circulated by a lot of individual mobility groups, as well as the mayor's office, to try to get people a sense of how people were using scooters, as well as other mobility services throughout the city, including transit, Pogo Bike Share, and Zipcar car share. So using all of that data, this think tank has been conducting this kind of evaluation, culminating into a final report that would make recommendations to the city, to DOMI, on what was the effectiveness of the scooter pilot and how and if it should continue. That report is actually anticipated in the next couple of weeks, and should encompass like a lot of really helpful information on just what happened as a part of the scooters being here. And from there, we'll be able to, as the city, as DOMI, as the mayor's office, distill a lot of that information and decide where to go from there in terms of scooters. What that can potentially mean is that the city would like to continue having scooters here. What that would mean is that we would have to go back to the state, pass legislation that would allow scooters to actually operate here legally. And then beyond that, pass a local ordinance that would allow DOMI to administer the program of the scooter share. That is a pretty lengthy process. For one, the state legislation is not convening again until late September. So we don't expect any action before that time. We also know that, once we get legislation at the state passed, we have to go to city council, and then eventually release, if we do decide to continue having scooters, release a request for proposals for scooter companies to propose that they continue their service here. So that is a pretty lengthy process. We're kind of working step by step, first with the state legislature and then locally. First looking at all of the results of this this final report. But all that to say, we don't expect scooters coming back here really in the next few months, probably not until potentially early next year at its soonest, because it does take a little while to ramp up having an entire fleet of scooters. What I will say that final report will include, aside from all of that data and evaluation, there will be a lot of recommendations on ways to improve upon this potential scooter program that will include, safety recommendations, other regulations on parking and riding, various policy recommendations, an assessment on sustainability of the scooter program, and also just information on who rides the scooters and why they're riding the scooters. I think from administering the program, we saw a lot of ridership in Oakland specifically, and the student population at large, but that definitely wasn't all of the riders. That was actually maybe about 40% identified as being a student. We kind of tend to see that because students don't really own cars. They depend on other forms of transportation, and we're relying on the scooters to some extent. But generally, we were seeing a very diverse group of people using the scooters, diverse racially and economically. So for that reason, DOMI and the mayor's office were still in support of the scooter program. We would still like to continue them under the assumption that the recommendations from the final report can be instituted in what other future iterations of the program and what that may look like. I also can just say that DOMI continues to support the other shared mobility services and coordination between those, particularly digital and physical integration, meaning having those various options available in one place, in one app, so that it can be easier to plan your trips out, and then physical coordination in the form of mobility hubs, so that all of those options are kind of co-located in convenient locations throughout the neighborhood and all neighborhoods throughout Pittsburgh. Don't really have too much else to share. Again, we're kind of learning more as we go along, and we'll be having more conversations with the mayor's office. Once the final report comes out, obviously we'll know more about what to do at that point. I can answer a few questions, but that's the extent.
Hey, Tosh, this is Mavis.
Yeah.
If I could ask a few questions. Do you know if the Senate Bill 692 will also include how the e-scooters will be identified? For example, will they be designated as a vehicle? And the reason for that is that it also will allow for the introduction of enforcement. For example, bicycles today are recognized as a vehicle, and so cyclists can get tickets. The e-scooters were never officially recognized. It was a demonstration project, so there was a lot of questions about enforcement. And then related to enforcement, what would it be? We had scooters, unfortunately, who were, they would block handicap parking spaces. They were parked on the sidewalk. We also had scooters that were going the wrong way down a one-way street, for example, or through stop signs. So there's potential for a parking violation or a moving violation. They're very different. And then who actually has the ability to enforce those violations? So do you know if those would be additional language that would be included in the Senate bill?
Yeah, so legislation at the state, which was introduced but never voted on, did have a component where private scooters were to be included as a vehicle in the vehicle code. So that would open up enforcement more broadly, specifically for private scooters. The spin scooters were able to be regulated and enforced by Pittsburgh police officers, though that it remains to be seen how much that actually took effect, how much the officers were actually directed to enforce the scooters, even though that guidance was given to them by the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. In the state bill that you mentioned, that would allow scooters to be ticketed in a manner that is akin to bicycles. They would be regulated essentially the same. So moving violations would apply. The parking regulations is something that, at least for the scooter share operation, that is something that could be managed in their permit and have various violations associated to instances of scooters being found on sidewalks or in ADA parking spaces. So that would be a policy recommendation coming out of the final report that we could eventually kind of institute as either in the permit or in the ordinance, depending on what the exact recommendation is. But you're correct, we've definitely heard a lot of those concerns. I agree those are some of our chief concerns about the scooters. It's something that we would look to correct if we continue to have a scooter program.
Do the scooters have lights in the front?
Yes.
Because one night I was driving down Ward Street and there were two scooters coming towards me. It was at night and it kind of startled me because I didn't expect them coming at me in the middle of the night. And so, I mean, it just, I didn't see the light on them whatsoever, I'm sorry. But it just, it's really a safety hazard. And driving down the wrong way in the streets or in sidewalks is just, it's totally nuts. I mean, there's gotta be some responsibility for people riding these things. And they need to be licensed. The scooters themselves need a license, identification on them. Like the bike should.
Yeah. I know that all of the scooters had ID codes on them that allow for reporting, but that was difficult to get that information when somebody's riding. I would agree, like that behavior is something that we wouldn't want to see. Is definitely was kind of a negative outcome of the program. Something that I think we struggle with all vehicles at the same time, but bikes can drive on streets without lights, same thing with cars, and there's a lot of,
I'm curious, how many bikes, scooters they fish out of the river?
I don't have the latest number on that. There was a small amount of them.
Can I ask, well, we're still cleaning up scooters on the south side. We still have them.
So they still are being removed from the streets.
So one question I'm getting from students who are actually buying their own scooter, which currently are not legally allowed to be ridden on the streets, but at the same time, because they have to have the brake, they have to have lights, they have to have the mirrors, blah, blah, blah. There's a whole list of things that they have to have, they don't have. But can they ride the scooters on the sidewalks? Can they ride the scooters in the bike lanes? I mean, they've never, the city cut off I know the city didn't cut off the program. The program was dropped from the legislation fund, but they never said, well, since we've already had people with scooters, here's where the rules stand. And they really need to clarify where the rules stand for the students as it is right now on the books. And you also do need to clarify, or maybe tell them again, because my understanding is that police officers have told me, oh no, we have nothing to do with that.
I would agree there's some confusion specifically on the enforcement.
And also, I've seen them doubling up. I've been there for the big street races. Those are really cool. Late at night, they run up the hill. That's a lot of fun. To track them down. The enforcement is probably one of the trickiest parts of the thing is that it was let loose on only parts, that's another question, only parts of the city with no enforcement. And it was kind of a Wild West show. Is this, when and if they come back, is it gonna be all the city?
So they were in all of the city. Yeah. And
They were?
yeah, and they were held to
Well, that runs up on
requirements.
south side slopes, I can tell you that.
Yeah, and you'd find them everywhere. And there were a lot of regulations on just that they were required to deploy a certain amount of scooters in regions of the city, just to ensure that there was even access throughout the city. A lot of them were in Oakland because there was a lot of demand for scooters in Oakland. And I definitely take your point that there needs to be more clarity in how they should be operated in the public right of way. I think like that's the unfortunate part of this law not passing at the state, because that continues to like put them in this kind of.
They can't even pass a budget, so.
Yeah.
Can I ask, if you're putting out an RFP for a company, is there any chance that if the scooters come back, it isn't spent? And this isn't really that important, I'm just asking out of curiosity.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Yeah, in an RFP, that would definitely be a possibility. You know, we would be weighing all of the different companies on their merits and their commitments that they would respond to that RFP with. I will say, you know, like Spin was selected at the beginning of this pilot through an RFP, and it definitely proved that they were a good partner early on and continue to do so throughout the pilot. Yeah, we would evaluate that at the beginning of an RFP the second time around.
I just want to note that Chris with Mobilify, Southwest PA, has a hand raised.
Hey, Chris.
Josh, hi everyone. Thanks for taking my question. For those unaware, my name is Chris Sandving. I'm with Mobilify Southwestern Pennsylvania. We work on a host of mobility issues at intersection with community. On the scooters question, as it relates to, I think, enforcement, and I think what at the heart of a lot of this is not yet another thing on the sidewalk that is not being enforced or cited for being there. Other cities have done geofencing to prohibit the use of the scooters on sidewalks, require you to put the scooters in a specific place and show proof that you had done that before you can end your trip, and so essentially you continue to be billed until you put the scooter where it belongs. Are those sorts of policies things that the city, working with Move PGH and whomever is the vendor of choice going forward, is looking to do? Because I can tell you in the cities I've been in, that I've personally also have used these scooters in other cities. It actually seems to work fairly well to keep them out of the clutter area. In fact, some of them have cable locks on them that you must use in order to end the trip, as well as all the other things.
Yeah, it's a great question and great point. There is a lot of technology that can be deployed to manage scooters, specifically where they ride, where they are not able to ride, where they can park and not park. Geofencing specifically, because it relies on GPS, cannot be utilized to prevent scooters from parking on sidewalks, because it's not that accurate. You know, GPS can have a drift of a few meters, and then it can't really reliably be used to designate all the sidewalks in the city. What there is more kind of evolving technology on scooters, or is using AI to detect onboard AI on all of the scooters to detect when the scooter is being ridden or parked on a sidewalk. That's technology that Spin would have liked to deploy if they had like continued authorization in Pittsburgh. And I think a lot of cities will have that type of technology. So there's continuing options to manage the system. We mentioned Lock 2 technology. That was something that we waited at the beginning of the program, but after speaking with other cities, have found that can also introduce difficulties. It doesn't prevent scooters from blocking sidewalks, and you really need an effective kind of network of bike racks throughout a city to enable that, which we unfortunately do not have. Maybe we will have soon, hopefully. But yes, these are all options on the table. I think the geofencing was something that we had tested out here and implemented. I don't know if anyone was aware, but in the downtown area and for a large area of the commercial district in Oakland, once you crossed over this geofence, you were required to park at various points called parking corrals that were marked. I think, we're definitely looking at increasing that type of strategy and having more of a hybrid of a kind of point-based parking for the scooters to try to cut down on that improper parking issue as much as possible. But all of those technologies and policies are definitely on the table, and that's something that we would reiterate upon.
I don't know if they were necessarily using geofencing for the boxes, and I get the accuracy thing because I had to literally drag this thing into the middle of the street to make it work whenever I first started. Maybe it's RFIDs or whatever. The technology isn't so much. The bigger thing is making it difficult in the first place for the user to behave badly with the scooter whenever they are discarding it or using it. Because I think we all have seen, well, at least for those of us who don't live in Oakland, enforcement is quite frankly non-existent on just about anything in the transportation realm, at least that we can see in a number of other neighborhoods. So just something to keep flagging, I think, going forward.
Yeah. Is there any way you look at the data with regard to the enforcement by Spin? When they say, if you drop the scooter in the street, we have to pick it up, you're going to be charged, or you're not going to be able to rent it. Is that data available anywhere?
Yeah, that will be in the final report. They do have records on all of the complaints submitted to their helpline, as well as the 311 line, which kind of remain the best strategy for having Spin move and correct any scooters. So all of that will be encompassed in the report. There will also be information on the amount of fines and suspensions and bans that they issue to repeat offenders who were reported. In all of the cases where there was a scooter reported, they did some investigation and followed through with those kind of bad actors to try to, over time, discourage that. I agree. It there could have been more, could have been done a little bit better. Yeah, that information will be available.
I mean, looking at a lot of European cities, they banned them at night. Many northern European cities have tied them to where we have the e-bikes. That's where the scooter goes. And we're seeing more e-bike racks around the city. If they, I like the scooter, but I don't like the way they've been enforced or used. Okay. I like the idea. I'd rather see more scooters and less cars. And by the way, just to set the record straight, students do bring their cars to university. Okay? Wish they didn't, because we don't have enough parking spaces, but that's another story. But, there's a lot of changes going on in other countries, and even in the United States. I mean, Bird left San Francisco. They've left several other cities. Other cities are, you're talking about what they're doing and everything. Well, I mean, they're enforcing that. It comes back down against the enforcement.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wonder, is it true that 18 is the minimum age? You can't go over under 18?
Legally, that's the minimum age, though there's not an ID verification process. I mean, that was, yeah.
I'm in Lawrenceville, I've seen double up kids riding down like 5 at a time, 5 scooters on the sidewalks all the time. Or it's like, they don't care, they yell at you, like, this we can do what we want, and they're gradually hit you, they don't care where they drive. I mean, where's the 15-mile-an-hour limit on those things?
Yeah, they have a speed governor on them. I know it.
Well, they jack it up on the sidewalks. They're supposed to shut them down on sidewalks, right?
Again, most countries look at 6 miles per hour.
Yeah, so with
15 is
the,
a rather high rate of speed for a scooter.
yeah, I agree, we wouldn't want them to ride on sidewalks, and there are a lot of reminders, and there were a lot of reminders in the app and on the scooter itself discouraging that. That only goes so far, so that's why we were looking at the new technology that could detect sidewalk riding as having some potential there. But yeah, I agree.
They passed the law already, no scooters on sidewalks, if it's electric. It's not supposed to be on sidewalks.
Elaine has something else.
I just want to know where it's coming from with DOMI and other organizations where we keep hearing students don't have cars. I live in Area E, it's 80% students, it's 56% oversubscribed for parking permits. So, I mean, the math is right there, unless the 20% have 15 cars each. So it's just a plea for all these government organizations to stop saying, and nonprofits and whoever else, to stop saying students don't bring cars. There's no date, I mean, the date is on the other side. So why did you say it? Like, where is it coming from? It's convenient, but why? It's not true. It's just.
I was just basing that off of the survey results that we got from the scooter riders who reported being a student. And we also asked whether they had a car. So obviously not everyone.
But that's not every student.
Yeah, I agree, like a portion of students bring cars.
The statement just comes out like when it's convenient, just please stop saying it, because decisions are made on it. And then that can lead to dangerous situations.
We need to be able to use the scooters to get students to not bring their cars.
That's a different matter.
Make the program that really, because I do think in the long run, it will work. I mean, we just can't have the condition that we have currently in Oakland.
But those scooters aren't going to get them back to Ohio, so mommy and daddy don't have to know when they come up. I mean, that's.
Offsite program.
I have another question. How will that report that you referenced be made?
Through a press release, coming from the mayor's office, either mayor's or gentleman.
Okay, guys, it's 7:15 now, so we're about 15 minutes past our time. Does anybody have any last comments, questions, clarifications?
Yes, Mavis?
I just real quickly, just to let folks know that there were a lot of conversations a few years ago where PennDOT had announced they wanted to investigate the widening of Bates Street. And so I just want to let folks know that the community conversations are about to get underway. The state is going to be hosting a virtual community stakeholder meeting in late July. And they're going to be introducing the purpose and needs as they see as the state. There were some communications from the Oakland stakeholders that the project need not be based on capacity building, that there be some considerations for public transit access down Bates to 2nd Avenue, Eliza Furnace Trail. There were questions about transit along the Bates Street corridor to get down to Second Avenue as well. So the state's aware of those multimodal interests in regard to the project. So those things will be discussed. The idea is to capture feedback from the attendees at that initial virtual meeting. And then the public engagement is anticipated to begin in the fall.
Mavis, how is PennDOT getting that out to folks, or are they just going to hold the meeting and expect people to show up?
So Chris, there was a invitation to the initial virtual meeting. There are like 125 people that are on this list. They represent Oakland constituency, from residents to students, institutions, nonprofits, community organizations, city government, public transit. There are a myriad of folks that are invited to that list. The public engagement will be much broader, much more comprehensive. It'll include many layers in regard to how folks can get engaged. And the state is going to use their community outreach partners. The TMA is part of that. The media will be part of that as well. And I think there's going to be a dedicated project microsite created for this that will allow people to be able to access information once the public engagement begins. I know that schedule is going to be posted for folks.
Okay, so your blasts will share that once the public meeting is known.
Absolutely. Yep. Mm-hmm.
That's what I was asking about, not the stakeholder side.
Okay, sorry. Yep.
Okay, well, thank you, Mavis. This is great, very informative. Appreciate everybody coming along. Hope to see you next month when we talk music back in Oakland. And with that, I'm going to say goodnight. Bonsoir.
Thanks, everyone, for putting up with my presentation. I appreciate it.
It was great.
Take care.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thanks.